Good afternoon, and welcome to Everybody, the podcast which shares stories that highlight people in life, that make the world an interesting place, which ultimately ties us all together in unique and wonderful ways. And who am I, you might ask? I would be the head wrap socialite, wife, mom, micro influencer in the fashion and etiquette world. But on this podcast, I will be introducing you to some people who I've had the opportunity to meet along my journey, who have helped enrich me in my life in beautiful ways, and who I hope will do the same in yours. Today's special guest is Caftan designer extraordinaire, Malcolm King Harris, whom I was introduced to a few years ago through a special group of individuals who love caftans. It's called the Caftan Cuties. And firstly, I'd like to welcome you, Malcolm, to this episode and thank you for being a guest.
Greetings.
Hello.
This is my absolute pleasure.
I'm so glad that you're here. Malcolm, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Malcolm Harris. I am a fashion designer by trade that has chosen to specialize and focus on one creation, which is the caftan. And it is through that caftan that I have created not only a sort of niche market for myself, but I built an entire community around this magical garment.
What is it about the caftans that elicit this extraordinary and rather magical response from you?
I think it is, for me, there is something ancestral about it. And I can still remember growing up in Miami and seeing them everywhere and just being intrigued with, I wonder where that started. Because I know for a fact it didn't start with all of the snowbirds that were coming down to Miami from New York City.
Exactly. It goes back further than that.
Yes. And so after discovering the way that they are constructed, it was like this simple thing would steal the show whenever I would see them come into a room. And so when I got older and I came to New York to make my living, I got the very unique pleasure of meeting Andre Leontali, who was always in caftans.
Oh my goodness. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to sit in this moment right now because I absolutely adored ALT. I loved Andre Leontali so much. So just a quick aside for those who don't know who Andre Leontali was. He was an African-American fashion journalist, an author. He was also an editor-at-large for Vogue magazine for several years and its first African-American male creative director. I mean, he was iconic in the fashion world. How did you meet him?
So I moved to New York in 1985. I actually came to New York to meet people like Andre Leontali because I grew up seeing him in the magazines that I would have to sneak off to buy because no one in my family was really into fashion in that way. And I just always knew that one day I would meet him.
Wow.
And the very first time I met him was around 1986. Back then, everyone in fashion was just around.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
And so the first time I met him, I just stood there in awe. I didn't say a word. I just looked at the man because he was just this towering figure.
Right. Larger than life.
Yeah. And at that time, if I'm really honest, I had nothing to say. I had no career to speak of. I had not made a name for myself. I was just beginning. And so I just stood there like a deer in headlights.
Right.
Fast forward probably 6 or 7 years later, I had this full-on fashion career. I was designing my own collection and I met him downstairs from my studio.
Oh my gosh.
And he was just there at the newsstand. And I looked at him and I said, how come you've never been to one of my fashion shows?
Wow. Well, you are bold.
Oh, yeah. And he just stood there with his mouth wide open, like, and who are you?
And
and,
you
and
said,
literally, I said to him, I said, my name is Malcolm Harris. I'm from Miami, Florida. And my design studio is just here. And I'm going to take you there.
oh my gosh.
And he had his coffee in one hand.
Hmm.
He had Women's Wear Daily in the other.
Love it.
And I dragged him upstairs to my studio, which at that point was on 57th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. I used to, by my design studio, I lived in one section and had the design studio in the other section, but it was in the ballroom of the old Vanderbilt mansion.
Oh my gosh.
And so
Mm.
I dragged this man off of the street, like literally pulling him by his cape.
I would have
and I
loved to see that.
and I and I take him up to my studio.
Wow.
One day I will send you the article that he then after that wrote about me in Vogue magazine
Oh,
about how I brought him off of the street into my studio.
wow. You know what? Talk about making a name for yourself, making your own encounters happen. I mean, that's how you do it. You were given this moment in time. And in one hand, it's, do you take this moment or do you stand back and watch the moment happen? And you took the moment in your hand and you literally walked with it. I love it.
And it was like, and after that, it's like we had known each other all of our lives.
Wow. Aren't those the
And
best?
yeah, and he just became like my sort of fairy godfather for
Mm,
many years in the fashion business.
love it.
And so my first caftan that I ever got was from Andre as a gift. And everybody around me, they were so excited about this caftan. But for me, it was a chance to deconstruct this thing and figure out why it was so magical.
Oh, interesting.
And also there were like these, great opera singers like Leontine Price
Yes.
and Jesse Norman that also wore these magical caftans.
Hmm.
So for the most part, I never even wore the thing. All I did was just look at it for
Right.
years.
Wow. I always say like halftimes are truly transformative. But once that design is translated into an actual garment, it becomes magical for the wearer.
Yeah. I always tell people that because I am a trained designer, I
Mhm.
started my career off working in Paris. I was at Yves Saint Laurent for several years.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
that's where I learned the bells and whistles of fashion. I learned it all while living in Paris. What I have come to realize now
Mhm.
is that I can design anything. I can put as many ruffles on something and put as many pleats,
Right.
but with a caftan, because it is so simple,
Mhm.
it takes more work to do something that is so simple and it has to be so beautiful, and you can pull none of the tricks to
Right.
make it be so. It just has to do all of those things based on construction,
Mhm.
fabric, and form. And that's it.
Wow. And that's why I enjoy watching your creations. I know that you're on different social media platforms, Instagram and TikTok, where you're following. Oh my gosh, on TikTok, I'm like, you go, Malcolm, do your thing. Um, it is truly amazing for me to watch the different creations that you bring to life. When did you know that fashion was your passion?
When I tell you, I got so lucky
Hmm.
that when I was very little, I happened to walk in
Hmm.
on my mother and father watching a movie, and it had Diana Ross in it, and
You
it
know
was
what?
called Mahogany.
Oh my gosh. That my favorite movie of all time.
I remember walking into the room and everybody like, what is
Mm.
this? And and this was back in the day when they had like this, I don't know if it was VHS or whatever it was.
Mhm.
And the tape kept snapping. And they
Okay.
kept stopping it and doing all these things. And I was just like, that's the woman from the Supremes.
Yeah.
What
Hmm.
is she doing it like in a movie like this? And that movie changed my life.
Wow.
There is a name for this thing that I think I want to be. Because before that, I would cut up sheets. I would have to cut up the sheets and hide them from my mother because I was always trying to like make something out of them.
Mhm.
But that movie was the beginning. And then my father bought a dry cleaner.
Oh, wow.
And because of that dry cleaners, that is where I learned how to sew. 12 years old.
Wow.
Because my father had taught himself how to sew after the guy who was in charge of alterations decided to quit.
Oh, interesting.
So I had this opportunity to deconstruct things in order to put them back together because
Mhm.
I could pull the seams, I could go inside of the seams and pull things out.
Right.
And so it became my this is a way for me to connect with my father.
Right.
Then it became, oh, this is a way for me to learn how to do this thing that Diana Ross was doing in that movie.
Oh, for those of you who have not seen Mahogany, which it is definitely a classic, I would suggest, or if you haven't watched it in a long time, you must go back and watch because then you can really appreciate exactly what Malcolm is saying. Diana Ross's character, she starts off as a seamstress and
Yes.
she eventually goes on and she becomes this model. Please continue, Malcolm. I digress sometimes.
but I'm so happy you did that because I think we have lost some of that sort of reverence for those movies that literally not just for me,
Mhm.
for so many people that watched that movie and watched versions of Mahogany that
Mhm.
came along afterwards. It propelled us into this world of fantasy.
Yeah, for sure.
And for myself, I even followed the same trajectory of Diana Ross's character by becoming a model first.
Oh my.
That's how I got my first trip to Paris. It wasn't because I was designing, it
Mhm.
was because of a designer by the name of Jean-Paul Gaultier dancing in a club in New York City and invited me to come to Paris to be in one of his shows.
Wow.
That's how I ended up in Paris, and I hated it. I don't know what happened with Tracy Chambers in Mahogany, but that is not what's happening with me. I had no business, even going down that. I was short. I love to eat. Even though I was just like naturally thin, but it was just like people are not eating. What is going on here?
But the fact that one of the greats, Jean Paul Gaultier, saw something in you that propelled you to try modeling, that is amazing. And then that spun off into your love.
That I always say my cheekbones got me through the door. My talent kept me there.
I do. I love that. I have to write that quote down.
The cheekbones literally got me through the door. And then once I got there, it was like, okay, let me show these people my real talent.
And I'm sure as soon as they saw you unleash, the true talent that you have, they were just, I'm sure, spellbound.
Like when I think about it now,
Hmm.
when I got to Paris, one of the first people I met
Hmm.
was Miss J. Everybody knows him now as Miss J.
I love Miss J too.
But he was already living in Paris.
Mm.
And so he had also seen me in New York. But we weren't friends in New York. We were kind of like, we noticed each other from a distance. And because he also ended up in Paris because of Jean-Paul Gaultier.
Amazing.
So it was one of those things where it was like people were constantly passing the torch around.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I remember even after myself, I had to pass it to the next person that came from New York to Paris.
Right. Talk
But
about being in the right place at the right time.
yeah. But it was a beautiful time to sort of figure out exactly where my true passion was. And if I was going to pursue it, I got an opportunity to pursue it at the very highest level.
Wow.
And so that's why I know that it is your talent and your luck
Hmm.
and your cheekbones
Yeah.
all work in your favor.
They all converge together for the
Yes.
greater good.
Yes.
So, what is one memory that you have about Paris?
This is the one thing that for myself that I
Mm-hmm.
always miss about being in Paris. And it is the solitude of just being in this magical city with
Mm,
so much history.
right.
They really do pride themselves on sort of moving out of the way of each other, especially for the kind of grace that is given to creative beings
Mm.
that you don't get in other places.
Malcolm, is there anything that gave you room to pause while living in Paris?
One of the things that I will be honest about
Mm-hmm.
is that I have seen over the past 30 to 40 years how it has shifted.
Mm.
Because there was always this bizarre distinction
Mm-hmm.
and grace given to African Americans that were living in Paris.
Mm.
But that
Mm-hmm.
same grace was not extended to Africans that lived in Paris.
Wow.
And
Interesting.
so once you pick that up, it is very difficult to live with that sort of privilege
Yeah.
because that's what it is, right?
Right.
It was part of the reason why I actually came back to New York
Mm.
from Paris because it became too difficult to constantly be reminded of that sort of thing.
That's so
Yeah.
so interesting. So, Malcolm, how do you take up your space?
Something that I have used in my own life. Watch me not only enter the space,
Mm-hmm.
watch me dominate it,
I love it.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that is one reason why I think the Caftan for me
Mm-hmm.
is so important. It is because when I walk into those spaces and
Mm-hmm.
I am wearing this ancestral garment
Mm-hmm.
that we created,
Wow.
that was created in Africa, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's been called a million different names.
Mm-hmm.
And when I enter a space and I am carrying those ancestors with me, I never feel like it's just me.
Wow. That's
You
that's
know,
that's
I am
powerful.
carrying all of that majesty, all of that regalness into that space.
Mm.
And so you can like it or not,
Mm-hmm.
we are here. We have entered the room.
Right.
And so I think that is also the reason why I have such an incredible community
Mm-hmm.
because those same men and women that
Mm-hmm.
I make those things for and I transfer that energy into them, when they walk into a space, it is the same exact thing.
I love that.
And it is also the reason why they become not only like family and friends,
Mm-hmm.
they become repeat customers because they want that more and more and more and more
For
everywhere
sure.
they go.
For sure.
It is, oh, that feels good,
Right.
you know? And so I am happen to be at this very moment
Mm-hmm.
the beneficiary of that passing the torch around.
Right. Right. And I love what you just said too, of when you put on these magical caftan garments and you walk into a space, you carry the ancestors with you. And that brings me to something that I've wanted to share with you. And I remember when I had asked you to create this beautiful black caftan. And I remember when I received it and I opened it up. First of all, the way that you wrap it made me feel like a queen when I was unboxing
Mhm.
it. And the note that you had put inside, I will always cherish. You sign every garment, which I loved, and you said, eventually, this piece will mold with you. In time, even my signature will fade away.
Mm.
But then this garment becomes truly yours. I thought to myself, wow. I mean, that took the breath out of me.
Mm.
And as I wear the piece, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It flows with my being. And I feel so regal and I feel so special that you took the time to create this beautiful piece for myself, which is mine to behold.
Oh, that makes me feel so good.
But it's the truth.
I have goosebumps, like literally, because I can remember the day that I made that.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember it was raining outside,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it was, what does one wear on a day like today? And I know the sun is going to come out later. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, neoprene.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what I love about the piece that I made for you is that it forces not only you, it takes up space.
Yes.
It physically takes up space.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I saw you wearing it, I was like, oh my God, she gets it. She
Mm.
gets that this takes space. And there, it's impossible to shrink when wearing something like that. Even if you're not in the mood,
Mm-hmm.
it pushes you forward in that way. And for you to understand it and to appreciate it means the world to me.
Oh, my friend. And I wanted to ask you, where do you draw your inspirations from? Because each katan is different.
The best thing to have ever happened to me has been meditation.
Mm.
It is the best thing that ever came into my life almost 10 years ago. And the way that I design
Mm-hmm.
is I design from what's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
How do we solve it?
Love it. Love it.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And people don't really, I think that a lot of designers design for their own sort of fantasy.
Okay.
So when I design, I think of, give you an example.
Okay.
I was approached by the folks from that do this show for Yolanda Adams.
Like the
And
Yolanda
so
Adams.
the Yolanda Adams,
Wow.
yes.
Okay.
And this is recent.
Okay.
And they had one caftan in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to them, but what's the scene? And so they told me the scene. They said, this is how it's going to be. I sat with it and I just sort of I just said, okay, let's meditate this out. And I gave them something very similar to what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the scene, and I can't really go into that,
Of course.
because of the scene, I had to make certain changes and shifts in the caftan. And when they told me that she is 6'1",
Mm.
I was just like, oh, this is space beyond space on top of space. Let's do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's really, you talk about occupying space.
Right.
Let's really, allow this woman to be able to create this art in this scene
Right.
where it's not just about what she is wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And in the scene, she is solving a problem.
Wow.
And so it was just like, this is too perfect for me.
Oh, I cannot
I
wait.
didn't even know Yolanda Adams was an actress
Oh my
until
gosh.
approached me with this thing.
She is fantastic. I mean, she does a little bit of everything. You talk about singer, songwriter, glamazon,
Yes.
actor. It's like, oh my goodness, it's like, what things can she not do? She is amazing. Amazing. So congratulations on that. Like that is wonderful. And I'm gonna every chance I get, anytime she shows up, I'm gonna peek it out. Is this where the caftan is gonna show up? I cannot wait, and I'm just so happy for you, and just so proud of you. Where did the name Caftan Culture come from?
I chose Caftan Culture Global
Mm-hmm.
as the name after I had traveled around the Middle East.
Ah,
And
okay.
what I had noticed from traveling was how people gathered around, especially women,
Mm-hmm.
around the Middle East in these sort of private sessions and functions to show off their caftans.
Mm.
It wasn't just about showing them off. There was a whole culture around the way they were constructed, how they were worn for special occasions, how they were worn to celebrate certain things, how they were worn just around women.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me was very special. And the greatest thing was that because I was a designer,
Mm-hmm.
there was almost like this special waiver around me
Mm.
that
Mm-hmm.
allowed me sort of um, an entree into those spaces
Okay.
that are not where men are not privy to at all.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so when I came back to the United States, I to replicate that sense of community.
Ah.
So it is not just about the caftan. It is also about around the culture of caftans.
Oh wow, I love it. And ultimately though, it's like you said, it's like it's not about the caftans, it's about creating that culture around the caftans. So really like you could branch yourself out and do completely different things within this medium.
Get ready.
I love it. Malcolm, what brings you happiness?
This is the reason why I'm so happy to be here
Hmm.
in this current moment at this particular time in history. Never before in my entire 30 plus years of designing
Hmm.
did I have such a direct connection to the audience that is actually wearing the things that I make. And there is not a single day that goes by that I don't receive a photo of a
Hmm.
woman smiling, wearing her caftan. There's not a single day that goes by that I don't receive some note, some little gesture of kindness
Mm.
based on this thing that I have created from that special place inside of me
Hmm.
that is still that 12-year-old boy
Wow.
that first sat down at the sewing machine.
Wow.
And when they write those things to me,
Hmm.
all of the trials and tribulations to get to this point, they
Mm.
melt away.
Right.
They literally melt away because I am now, like sometimes I tell people, I'm not in the fashion industry.
Hmm.
I'm in the smile industry
Mm.
because when those women, and I mean, and like, that's the reason I have TikTok
Yeah.
and these social media platforms is so that I
Mhm.
can share them with everyone else,
I love it.
you know?
Hmm.
And so it is this. So to answer your question, it is really this community that has, and they have relationships outside of me.
Right.
I am just I am just at this point,
Mhm.
you know,
Like the
the sort of
conduit.
conduit
Yeah.
to all of this sort of community, and it just feels joyous to be a part of it.
Wow.
So that is what brings me the most happiness outside of the normal things with family and
Mhm.
my wonderful friends and the people that make sure that I am able to keep going,
Mm.
you know. But this community of and primarily women,
Mm.
and the reason because I there are times when I will say it that this is my sort of love letter to Black women that don't play about me.
Hmm.
They don't play about me,
That is true. Hmm.
you know, and it is because I have been so honest and authentic with them. I tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly
Hmm.
because I share that with them. And I sew. My TikTok is just a live stream of me sewing.
Oh, and I love that because like at night I'm like, oh my gosh, what's what's here I go. I'm like, what's Malcolm doing?
And so they literally get to see me making their garments. These are women who started out with me when
Mhm.
my little machine of a company was
Right.
in my basement,
Wow.
you know? And these women have rallied around me to
Hmm.
say, we got you.
I love it.
No matter what it is, we got you.
Hmm.
There, when I tell you this is the life that I prayed for, that I dreamed of, and to be able to sit in it and to be so grateful is there. I couldn't help but be happy. So I sometimes I walk by myself in the mirror and I say, take that smile off of your face. Get to work. Stop fawning over yourself because I'm just so. My mother used to say, "I am as pleased as punch."
I love And what I love about you though, Malcolm, is that like you said, you're so authentic and you can feel the happiness when I'm watching your TikToks, when I'm watching, your Instagram. You are just so, I mean, you exude happiness. And in my mind, I was thinking of, as you were speaking about happiness, there's this author by the name of Lisa Cypers Kamen, and she says happiness is not a destination. It cannot be bought, sold, or traded. Happiness is the gift of the journey.
Mm.
And I think about you and the journey that you've gone on and that you continue to go on. And you bring that happiness and you share that joy and that authenticity and that love with everybody through the creations that you make, but also by you just being you. So I just want to
Thank
thank
you,
you.
thank you, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me feel wonderful.
Aw.
And I
And
want to keep doing it.
absolutely, you're going to keep doing it because we want more of the Caftan culture global creation. We want it all. We want it all.
Thank you.
Is there any words of wisdom that you would like to leave for the listeners, for those who are looking to find their passion?
If I could say anything to encourage anyone,
Mm-hmm.
and that is to just find that one thing that brings you joy in any day. That one thing, no matter how difficult your life may seem,
Mm-hmm.
find that one thing. It can be as small as going out walking and finding flowers.
Mm.
Anything that's going to bring some sort of joy and beauty into your life. That
Mm.
one thing. And then after that, do one thing more and then another thing. And before you know it,
Mm-hmm.
something magical will happen.
Oh.
That's been the one thing that has helped me along this journey is to keep finding that one thing. Caftan is my one thing.
And sure,
I'm a one-hit wonder, baby.
I love it. It's one of those things. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's
Keep doing you, boo.
right.
But I so thank you for taking this time out today to talk with me and to share with our listeners, your journey. And I love the pieces of wisdom that you've dropped. And I just keep going back to the cheekbones got me here. And you are magical, Malcolm. And I honestly wish you nothing but success and am an admirer of you. And I want to see this Caftan. I want to see you take the world by storm. And I know you will because you've already done it. It is just a privilege to be able to say that you are my friend. And thank you for sharing your creations with me. And I wear my caftan and I wear it proudly. I will always take up space and bring the ancestors with me.
And like I close all of my letters now. I honor you, I adore you, and I thank you.
I love you, my friend.
Love you too.
I love you. And
Love you too.
and
Oh, this is beautiful.
when I come to New York, I'm gonna sit on that pink sofa.
Yes.
And you're gonna have your cappuccino, and I'm gonna have my green tea. And one thing I didn't ask you, or when you're
Yes.
doing your TikToks, you have that sign. Wait, viva
Viva la
la vida. Long live life.
Long live life.
I love that. What does
It
that
is-
mean for you?
It was the last thing that Frida Kahlo wrote before she passed away.
Wow.
And that to me is just like, that's all we can do
Mm-hmm.
is live it.
Live it.
We just have to live it every day. That's why I have it posted just there. Every day before I head upstairs to my studio, I say, okay, let's get to it. Time to live it.
Oh,
Viva la vida.
Blessings on your week, Malcolm, and we will definitely catch up soon. You're welcome on this podcast anytime. Love you.
That's a promise.
Mwah.
Oh, that was good.
You rock.